Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to say congratulations. You've made it today thus far, being here. You had a lot of other options, choices, things you could be doing right now, but you're listening to us, and we're glad to be with you. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in with the Bhakti Center. And my name is Dal Grunga, and I'm here with the Chuta Gopi. And our tri-host Kishore is not with us today, but we love him, and we'll see him again soon. And this is it. We made it this far. Good job, guys. How you doing, Chuta?
Sheltered.
Sheltered. That's a beautiful thing. I am also doing well, feeling sheltered, and grateful. Thank you. Anything we got to say, share, updates, announcements before we kick off?
I'm good.
She's good. Just ready to dive. Nothing. I got nothing. Ready to dive in and get into it. Okay. Well, we are in Bhagavad Gita. If you're new to the show or new listening to us, we read Bhagavad Gita as a form of spiritual inspiration. Bhagavad Gita is they say seminal text, but I don't know if I like that word seminal. But I've heard seminal texts of Vedic wisdom, meaning like foundational. Yeah, foundational. Let's go with that word. Foundational text of Vedic wisdom, guiding us in matters of the soul and the great beyond, the nature of life and how to navigate our way through it. And we read from there, and then we take a little spiritual wisdom with us and reminders and share how it reflects on our life. And we're in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And we read a few verses yesterday. I like that we read the few verses yesterday, and we talked about the idea of lust came up. And Achyuta, you so nicely elaborated for us and illuminated the idea of lust in a greater context than what we might normally think of it as, of some sexual urging or longing or desire, but really expanding it to not just desire, because desire, as we looked at, is something that never goes away. We can simply curb or change or refine or upgrade our desires, because the need for belonging, the need for connection, the need for acceptance, the need for love is inbuilt into our system. It's hardwired. Like there are certain apps on your phone that you just can't delete, although you wish you could. Like, why can't this, fitness app go? Why can't the Apple Wallet app go away? And it's like, it cannot be deleted because it's hard bound into the system. And so there are certain things hard bound into our system, like the need for love and belonging and connection. So the desire to find that never goes away. We just have to adjust our strategies. And so lust, our kama in this context, is really referred to as, you put it so nicely, the insatiable desires that that actually seem to, in the short run, bring us closer to that intrinsic need, but actually take us further away from it. And we owe it to ourselves to pause and ask ourselves, what is it that I really want from this? What is it that I really want from this relationship, this indulgence, this habit, this going somewhere, whatever it might be? And then to ask ourselves, do I really think I'm going to find it here, as opposed to just acting on impulse or being short-sighted, or just like kind of being like robotic and mechanic in life, which is very easy for us to get to, and life conditions us in that way. There's a lot of people, a lot of companies that want us to live on autopilot and just kind of make decisions on impulse, etc. But Krishna here is pointing that out to us, that we end up in places in life because we're making decisions governed by this sense of lust, defined as overriding desire for something that actually brings me away from what I really want.
And
That's
I
where we were
think
yesterday.
I
That's
think
everything you said in a nice way. You said
and
it better,
and
but I was recapping.
the whole like insatiable desires. I can't really take credit for that. That was Krishna in Bhagavad Gita itself.
What can we take credit? What can any of us take credit for?
But I do feel like it goes hand in hand nicely with the fact that we were talking about attachment and aversion before. And a few days ago, we were talking about attachment and aversion, and I feel like these two principles go hand in hand because when we start pointing these things out and acknowledging them, we start to get attached to like this blame game, right? Like,
Mm,
who is it? It's the companies that want me to do, it's the iPhone that wants me to do, it's the like, and we keep pointing out and pointing the finger and placing blame somewhere when really, and Krishna keeps pointing this out, these are material world issues.
yeah.
um, there's kind of nowhere that you're going to go in the material world where you're not going to have these same things. They're trying to point out, okay, like now who is responsible for what happened to me? And Krishna is trying to remind us that ultimately we can be responsible for what happens to us. We have been responsible for what happens to us. Now we usually tend to only think of that in the bad way. I know my mom, when she first read Bhagavad Gita, she's like, I felt so attacked when I heard about the overarching principle of karma. And she said she felt like, you mean to tell me that I brought this upon myself, all of the icky feelings and all of the harsh things that we go through in life, because karma teaches us that this is just balancing the scales. So usually when we hear about this karma and we hear about we are responsible for the things that happen to us, we only think about it in the bad way. And once again, I kind of just want to bring my mind back to, if I'm going to accept those bad things, then let me also accept the good, the winter and the summer, not just one or the other. And I feel as though we do get very much attached to, oh my gosh, you mean I'm responsible for all of this and I can't place any of the blame anywhere else? And then that means that all these bad things is just on me. But all the good things are on you too. There are amazing things and amazing qualities that, yes, we have been honing for lifetimes. If all of these things make us responsible and these are material world issues, then also we're responsible for being right here, right now, with the yearning and the desire to dive into God consciousness.
Mm,
That is a wonderful outcome. It's an amazing outcome that people fight for lifetimes for. An amazing outcome that, if we are to really put our stock and our faith in what the Vedas are telling us, there are people from all over the universe and different planetary systems hoping for a chance to get what we have right now. A coming together of like minded souls simply yearning to know who God is.
mm. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, the idea of karma can be one thing about karma that I always keep in mind when the word comes up is that there's a broad understanding of how it works, which I really appreciate you sharing, like the balancing of scales and like we have this just universal laws in general about like action and reaction and in something you put something in and that's what comes out. So even outside of spiritual context, we have this idea of the universe constantly balancing itself, and at the same time that it can feel like an affront, or a blaming or a shaming, as somebody mentioned in our comments here, a blaming or a shaming. And so there's a broad understanding of it. And then there's also a sense of like, actually, in some ways, it's so intricate and beyond me to really say why something is happening to me or another person. And I think especially in the context of I think that just because something quote unquote bad happens, that it's easy to therefore then attach that to a character. Like, oh, you're a bad person, as opposed to like, I'm driving my car, I drive over a piece of glass, my tire flattens and I'm stuck on the side of the road. I'm I'm such a terrible person. No, you just you just happened to drive over, you drove over a piece of glass, and the result of driving over a piece of glass is that your tire bursts and now you're stuck. And those are the consequences. And I think that when we understand the climate of the material world, and I think so much of where the Bhagavad Gita has been leading us, and again, starting with the idea of us being spirit souls, now let's understand this concept of karma yoga, which is here in the Bhagavad Gita. Because as a spirit soul, you're in a compromised situation. Prabhupada would say, let's try to make the best use of a bad bargain. The bad bargain is that I'm an eternal spirit soul made of Sat Chit Ananda, eternality, bliss, and knowledge, consciousness, but I'm encased in this material body, in this material mind, using this material intelligence with this false sense of who I am. And so I'm like kind of like in this stuck in this old operating system that's very limiting and is uncomfortable and painstaking. Um, and so just letting you know, like this is the climate, this is the situation that you're in. And so it's not necessarily like, it's just that you're just gonna bump. You're gonna naturally like the nature of it is that we're all bulls in a china shop that are bumping into things and breaking things, and it's like every move we make sets something else off, and it's just the nature of this world. And so this idea of karma yoga of like, how can I counteract this in a way? And I think that when we start to look at the goals that we set for ourselves. I think the idea of karma yoga is now of like, my life is not to deepen myself in this web of material entanglement, but it's understanding what does it mean to elevate myself out of it. And then I start to rethink about what is fortune and misfortune, and what is a punishment or a blessing. And we don't always see that in the moments, um but we can start to get a little bit of perspective about something happening to me because I'm such a bad person and I'm being punished, or something happening to me because it's something that I like. I was Okay, I'm gonna pause here because I was gonna tell another story, but I'm talking for a while and I want to hear from you. um but I have an example I can share.
I think you should share the example, because what I was going to say is I think it takes a breed of really compassionate souls to help us out,
Mm,
to walk with each other. Because even in many, many spiritual communities, you won't find people willing to say, this is not your story. This is just what's happening to the vehicle. Even in
mm,
Krishna consciousness, you will be hard pressed to find the people who will say, who have been reading this Bhagavad Gita, hearing again and again, this body is just an overcoat. This body is just a vehicle. And we've been studying it for years and decades, but still there are not so many people who are willing to remember that in the hard times, rather than blame it, chalk it up, and cast someone over to the side. Um, and sometimes it can be a little bit about control, because if it's just what's happening to your overcoat and it's not a reflection of what your soul is, then how in the world is my service supposed to be better than yours? And if my service is not better than yours, then how can I feel okay with myself? Because if I can't be better than you, then what's to say that the Supreme Person is going to even have room to look at me at all? In order to make myself seen by the Supreme Person, I clearly have to be better than everybody else, which simply isn't true. Um, our Krishna has presented himself within the heart of every single living entity, simply to see that living entity. That Krishna in the heart has no other function, no other purpose. Doesn't have to go save the world, doesn't have to do anything but just see and be with us. So, if we are really to believe what we have been reading, preaching, learning, understanding, um, then we don't any longer have the need to feel better than someone else in order to make our spiritual situation seem better. Krishna can see us and see that other person and bless us and bless that other person. And it still doesn't diminish or take away from the unlimited power of Krishna, because that is how inconceivable Krishna is. So when we are looking at karma, it takes a group of compassionate minded, soft hearted souls to come together and say, but you know what? Regardless of whatever the world will say, this is this is your overcoat.
Mm.
And all of us, we are meant for more than dealing with the flat tires of these bodies.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you highlighting that example of this is just happening to the vehicle or the overcoat. It's kind of like we talk about the body being like the vehicle in the car, and it's like a rental car. You ever have like a rental, and then like you kind of you bump it, you fender bender somebody or bump into somebody, like it's okay, it's a rental, or you you ever come back to a rental car and you see a car and it's just like covered in dust or dirt or whatever, and you're like, where did they go? And it's like, it's a rental, no worries. Because you know that it's a rental. And I think it's like that with this life, with this body, with this mind, with where we are in this life. It's like, you know what, it's a rental. I'm giving it all back at a certain point. And just because in the vehicle, like we are driving through the shit storms. That is a family show, keeping it light, but we are driving through the shit storms of life, and we are in this like tank of a machine that gets dinged up. We're driving through a meteor field, and it's going to get dinged up, and it's just the nature of driving through a storm, driving through a meteor field, driving through a volcano, passing through a hurricane. Like, your vehicle is going to get dinged up, and that's what we're experiencing. And it's just the consequence of being in the place that we're in. And so the story I was going to tell was, I was listening to this interview with Kevin Hart and Jay Shetty did an interview together on Jay Shetty's podcast. And Kevin Hart was talking about his own upbringing and his own relationship with his father. Kevin Hart is known as a very optimistic, high energy, positive mindset individual that's obviously accomplished a lot in his life. And he was thinking about like actually like this was his story about respect and gratitude for his father, even though his father um, caused a lot of pain in his life. His father went to jail, got into drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he was just saying, like, I learned so much from my father that in many ways made me who I am today. And he said he didn't do it on purpose. He never told me, I went to jail so that you didn't have to. He never told me, like, I made all these mistakes for your benefit and now, learn for me, et cetera. Like, it wasn't even intentional. And like, the lessons we're meant to learn aren't even necessarily intentional from the people that we're learning them from. But what we could think is such a messy, unfortunate situation, if we look for it in some ways, can actually, maybe what in the moment seemed like such a messy, terrible circumstance for us to be put in was actually the catalyst through which we're able to get to where we were today or someplace in the future. And so I was just listening to that yesterday. And so I was thinking of that example of someone that looked back on what could very well easily seen as like a crappy life, a crappy upbringing, or whatever. And it's like, I'm here today because of that, and it's not that I would wish that on somebody else or myself again, but that's just what it was. And that's what I learned from it. And that's what, in many ways, like, apparently what I needed in order to get to where I am right now.
Reminds me of Srila Prabhupada. looking at many disciples, and he was kind of, his health had declined and he was near to passing. And he said, "Don't think this won't happen to you."
Mm.
And we walk through this material world thinking that none of these situations will happen to us. We walk through with this kind of misguided idealism that none of the bad things will happen to us, and that none of the bad things hold much importance because they are uncomfortable. But that uncomfortability often brings us closer to the feet of God.
Mm.
And I had a friend who was expressing their feelings toward their spouse, and they were saying, I feel like in many ways, sometimes as a spouse, I failed. But I failed. God had me fail in order to bring you closer to Him. And that kind of intense self reflection and observation is what we see happening throughout every scripture. It's an
Mm.
intense self reflection that says, okay, things have happened to this rental car, but have they brought me and everyone around me closer to the feet of God?
Mm.
And then when we find that it does, then we have the example of Arjuna's own mother Kunti saying, "Fine, if that's the entry price, then let those calamities come again and again."
Mm. One of the things I appreciate, thank you for sharing that and being so deeply vulnerable and real. And one of the things I really, one of my greatest appreciations I on this podcast, one of the gifts that I've given is I feel like just getting to know you more and seeing your heart and seeing you've shared about your upbringing and challenges and um, rejections and um, school and just different things. And it we've discussed this before, the idea of the universe that is every individual, you know. And you're such um a person that I think you saw this when you went to India, that you're invited around the world for kirtans, or people listen to your kirtans around the world. And so it's easy to get a certain, just very simple surface level image of a person, like, oh, like a snapshot. And then I've appreciated just getting to know you so much more and seeing what's brought you to who you are today, and through so many challenges of like fearlessly trying to bring out your authentic self and allowing that journey of self-acceptance and self-embracing. And because I think that what we don't always see is that we're all going through it. you know we all experience our moments and periods of insecurities, of feeling like a failure in some element of life, feeling like I've let myself or others down, feeling like I've let God down. I'm not good enough for God in some way. Or, sure, God loves me because, he loves everybody, but, he has to, but it's not like he wants to. Like, why would he want to love me? And so, hearing you go through that journey and come, I really appreciate you sharing that honesty and vulnerability. So I just wanted to appreciate that a lot. Say thank you.
I am. That's so interesting. I feel like I hear that a lot. I wind up speaking to a lot of people, and I hear that a lot. That last comment of, "I know God has to love me, but why would he?" And I know throughout most of my life, I was always looking for people who were not like obligated to love me,
Mm.
because I didn't have friends. So for me, like, that was the goal in my mind, is to find those people who are not under any kind of societal or like familial obligation to love you, but then they love you anyway. And so when people ask me what made me pick my spiritual teacher, that's often um, the actual real hardcore truth of the answer. I kind of looked at this person and realized there's no like societal reason that you should care about me as much as you care about me, and yet you do. And that made a big impression on me. And I feel like in recent years I've been really questioning myself whenever my mind comes up with that, like, oh yeah, Krishna has to love me, but like, why should he? And I'm like, well, okay, why should he then? Let's list some responses. I, sitting with myself, can't think of any reason why I would be lovable. I started to tell myself that that was absolutely absurd. Like, that's absurd. At my most intrinsic nature, I have a soul that has done amazing things through this non cooperative vehicle of this body and other bodies. And that goes for every single one of us. We have done amazing, incredible things. And no one mistake can undo all of that. It's just not possible. And I've been wanting to get myself out of that mindset of, oh, this person should love me. I mean, like, they have to, but why should they? It's like, no one has to. First and foremost, if God is supreme and can do anything he wants, it doesn't have to do anything.
Mm.
But every second, every moment, each and every lifetime, he chooses to.
Yeah.
Because the supreme person sees the most amazing qualities in us, not looking at us saying, oh, well, you were once upon a time a murderer and a so and so and this and that. All our supreme person sees is, that's my person who gives me this service and this service and this service, and that is it. If the supreme person can concentrate on that, then I am determined to also concentrate on it.
Mm.
I have to find those things that are lovable.
Yeah, I love that. There's a couple things I want to share real quick, and then I want to hand it over to Kimberly because we're at time. One is that the idea of like actually God doesn't have to love us. I'll sometimes, my wife and I, like, I'll give her, sometimes I'll compliment her on something and she's like, oh, you have to say that because like you're my husband. I'm like, actually, no, I don't. I don't. The fact that I chose to be your husband, like I'm here, like we didn't know each other at one point, and we chose that. And then there's also the idea of for me, I'm in this idea of God's love for us. There's a particular instance in my mind that I remember. I have a 10-year-old nephew and a 6-year-old niece from my sisters. Um, and before my niece was born and my nephew was like 3, I remember I was visiting in California and just being in his presence. Because I used to also think like, what would God want to do with me? Like I just met, ever have a conversation with someone who's just boring? Like, they don't understand anything, or they're not ever, you try to play sports with somebody and they're so much better than you, or you're so much better than them. It's like, it's boring. Like, what would God's better at everything. Like, what kind of entertaining conversation could I have with God? And I just remember being there with my 3-year-old nephew and just thinking like, I could beat him at anything, but I love spending time with him. I love playing games with him. I love talking to him about what he's learning and what's going on and sharing, etc. And it was just like, oh, like that's the idea of love. It's not intellectually stimulating. It's something totally different. And I think that love also on that deepest level is that, because why does God love us? Because we're part of him. We're part of him. It's not like, God and us didn't know each other at some point. We happened to cross paths in the universe and he was like, whoa, like you look really cool. Like maybe we should hang out. And it's like, oh, well, you're not cool anymore. You're down there in the material world. Like, get your life together and then come back to me. It's like, no, it's like, you're a part of me. It's part of who he is. It's just like, there's that natural, um, and then, like you said, like a choosing to not give up, choosing to not give up. And I appreciate the point that you're making, is that for us to not give up ourselves, and that everybody has something lovable. There's an inherent lovableness deep beyond all of the rental car facades that people have in their life. So we're at time, and I want you to save your closing word, Achuta, for whatever it may be. And we're gonna turn it over to Kimberly. Kimberly, who wraps up things for us, gives us some takeaways, some catchphrases, stuff. What you got, Kimberly?
Thank you, Dai Alan and Chita. Today, we're taking away that our body is a rental vehicle and will naturally get dinged up as we drive through the storms. But we can shift our perspective and see that the uncomfortability can be a catalyst to bring us closer to the feet of God. And we are all lovable, and our souls have done some amazing and incredible things that mistakes cannot undo. And God loves us because we are a part and parcel of Him.
Closing word, Achuta.
Bhakti Chitamara just said it. So many people have said it. Bell Hooks wrote books about it. Love is a choice, an action. It's a verb. And every day we can choose, because Krishna is choosing us every day. And so sometimes it's creating the balance. It's choosing ourselves and choosing Krishna at the same time. And I like that those don't have to be opposed to one another. They don't have to be opposites. Krishna's on our team.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And my takeaway, amongst many things, is just the idea of, my capacity to love is obviously limited. Krishna is one of the definitions of Krishna, of being a supreme person, is the unlimited capacity to express and exchange love with every living being. So I don't have to play that role in everybody's life, and I can accept that. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that I should be careful about the ways that I allow hatred to come up in my heart towards anybody, because even if I'm not able to, it's not my job to completely shower love on every living being. I should understand that that's God's job, and that God will and does do that. And I should not be so quick to judge and dismiss and condemn another person, even if there's some challenge. I can set my boundaries. I can do what's needed. I can make sure that I'm taken care of and not overextending or sacrificing myself in a harmful way. But internally, the way that I view the way that I relate to other people is important, and is a part of my own, not because it's like they deserve this, that, or the other, but it's for me. It's for me to more align myself with the heart of God in a way that is beneficial for myself. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the beautiful chats in the podcast. Baldevi says this podcast is a tasty, savory, spiritual breakfast. Hare Krishna. It's 9 a.m. for us. We do this live every day. If you'd like to join us live, write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. And you can join us on the Zoom chat. We love you guys. We appreciate you. And today's Thursday, so we got one more tomorrow this week. We'll see you then, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.